apologize for no video, but my sound is better if you don't get to see my face, so count yourself lucky. I am Kathy Fairbanks, the Regional Director with the Northwest Michigan PTAC, PTAC Region 1, which covers the entire Upper Peninsula and the 10 counties of the Northwest Lower Peninsula. I really appreciate hosting this event today, along with the Saginaw Future Region 5 PTAC, which covers Aranac, Bay, Clare, Gladwin, Gratiot, Isabella, Midland, and Saginaw counties, and also the Flint Genesee Economic Alliance Region 6 PTAC, which covers Genesee, Huron, Lapeer, Sanilac, Shiawassee, St. Clair, and Tusola counties. In Michigan, there are 10 regional PTACs. To find your PTAC, you can go to the ptacsofmichigan.org. The Michigan PTACs are funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the Department of Defense's Defense Logistics Agency, and in part by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, or the MEDC, and we're all hosted locally by various organizations. PTAC stands for Procurement Technical Assistance Center, which I know really doesn't tell you much about us. But basically, PTACs are business consultants who specialize in doing business with the government. We exist to assist businesses with selling their products and services to the government, whether it be federal, state, or local government, also public hospitals and or universities. We have a very broad range of services, which Rebecca Young with Region 5 PTAC will outline during the panel discussion. Our mission is to enhance national defense and economic development of the state of Michigan by assisting Michigan businesses in our region in finding, obtaining, and performing on federal, state, and local government contracts and government prime and subcontracting opportunities, and assist with small business innovation, research, or SBIR, and small business technology transfer, STTR, grant programs. Our services are generally provided to you at no cost, but check with your local PTAC for the specifics of their individual services. With the narrow focus of our program, we have the ability to concentrate all our education and efforts on government contracting, making us specialists in this field. While we are specialists in government contracting, we are not cybersecurity specialists. We have general knowledge to guide our clients through Nist and Cmmc Cyber Requirements. For in-depth knowledge and assistance, especially technical assistance, we work with our resource partners and regional businesses. Today, we have asked resource partners, the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center, or MMTC, the Michigan Defense Center, and the University of Michigan Economic Growth Institute to share their programs and offerings with you. First, I would like to introduce Jeff Williams. He is the Cybersecurity Program Manager with the MMTC, who's going to provide a CMMC overview and implications for your business. Take it away, Jeff.
All right, good morning, everybody. How is everybody doing this morning? Hopefully fairly well. So this morning, let me get my screen shared here. All right. Gotta love it when things work right initially.
Jasmine, while Jeff is getting his screen up, will the presentations be available afterwards to the participants?
Good morning. Yes, the presentations will be available. And also just as a reminder, or this isn't a reminder, but if you do have questions during the presentations, please put them in the chat and we will have them answered accordingly. So thank you, Kathy. Jeff, do you want me to pull up your?
No, I got it. It's
I'm
just not wanting to refresh here. Let's give this a shot. All right. Everybody see the content here?
Yes.
All right, perfect.
Yes.
All right, sorry about that. So this morning we want to talk about the cybersecurity requirements that defense contractors have. And that includes a couple different concepts. That includes the concepts of both CMMC as well as the other primary cyber requirements that we do see today. Now, initially, anybody who's familiar with or who has ever experienced anything in regards to the DoD might be very familiar with some of these acronyms. If you're not, though, this is the type of thing that we see frequently when we look at defense contracting. We see CUI, we see CTI, we see CDI, we see Dfars. We hear about cybersecurity maturity model. We hear about Nist. And obviously, we always hear about the infamous little hacker or the infamous little individuals who are trying to steal our data. But overall, with the cyber requirements, what we really want to look at this morning is we're going to talk about a few topics. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the FARs and the Dfar cyber requirements. Now, we have to do that to see why we got to where we are today. We're going to look at some of the modifications that have occurred, and then we're going to talk about the primary initiatives that are causing a lot of confusion, a lot of stress, a lot of panic. And that's both the Dod Assessment Methodology as well as CMMC. And then finally, we're going to wrap up by looking at various items of what can be done from within our organizations. So if we start, obviously, when we talk about the Department of Defense, we often hear about CMMC, but what we're really looking at is what's referred to as the Dfars, or the Defense Federal Acquisition and Regulation System, or the supplement, rather. This is where the primary contract clauses exist when you're doing work with the Department of Defense. And a couple of those contract clauses in particular deal with cybersecurity requirements around sensitive information. Now, these requirements are actually not new. They first showed up back in 2013. And the clause in particular we're referring to is Dfars 252-204-2017. And the title of that clause is Safeguarding Unclassified Controlled Technical Information, or at least that was the title of it when it was added back in 2013. Now, the clause appeared quite differently then than it does now. At the time, it just said you need to supply adequate security, and that's pretty much it. But as we moved through time, we saw a few things happen. 2015 and 2016, notably, is when a document entitled Nist Special Publication 800-171 was released. And then shortly thereafter, the Dfars clause was updated to state that by providing adequate security meant implementing the requirements outlined within that document. Now, at that time, they also gave contractors a deadline. They said you need to have this documentation or these requirements in place by December 31st of 2017. Now, we saw roughly around that time the same type of confusion, panic, frustration that we are starting to see now. But really, in regards to that, what does the Dfars clause specify? Well, as you can see, and if your eyes are a lot better than mine, maybe you can even read it, but it really breaks down into 4 key topics in which that they say contractors have to do. Section A is the standard definition of terms. That just tells us what they mean by various terminology that they use. Section B is the primary one that we focus on when we talk about CMMC, when we talk about overall cybersecurity. And that clause states that they need to provide adequate security by proof of an implementation of Nist 800-171. Section C through G talk about reporting requirements if an incident does occur. And then finally, the section M there deals about subcontractors. What do you do if you work with subcontractors? How you need to flow down certain requirements to them if certain data and certain information is being shared. Now, overall, again, adequate security. What does that mean? Well, it really deals with two primary concerns. One, the contractor shall implement NIST 800-171 as soon as practical, but not later than December 31st, 2017. And the second portion is that they must apply other security measures when the contractor deems it's appropriate. Now, that second one is also a key point in regards to the fact that what 7012 is telling us is these requirements outlined are the bare minimum. They expect this at the very least, and they're recommending that contractors not only put additional measures upon their own systems, but potentially even flow additional requirements down through the supply chain as well. Now, the other aspect, why NIST 800-171? Why that specific document? Well, what the DoD initially realized, and especially NIST, was when we think of security, especially cybersecurity, we normally are just thinking about computers, technology. But in this day and age, in order to talk about security as a whole, there's various aspects and various avenues that needs to be considered. Physical security. How are we securing our building? How are we locking up physical files, our offices? Technical security. Yes, we have our computers and we have the servers in that environment, but we also have removable media, USB, portable hard drives. And the size and capacity of these removable drives is larger than what we would have thought about as far as a computer storage a few years ago. And especially in this day and age, and especially for smaller contractors, we also have to worry about external systems. Maybe it's a cloud computing, maybe it's email, hosted computers, cloud computers, things along those lines are terms that we often hear. So with the development of NIST 800-171, that deals with all of those. In fact, NIST 800-171 has 110 requirements total, but they're spread across 14 different families. Yes, we have our normal computer-related items or technology-related items, such as access and control, such as media protection, such as configuration management and system and information integrity. But if you look, there's also items on there that really don't necessarily have anything to do with computers. Awareness and training. How are employees or individuals responsible for information being made aware of what current threats there are? How are they being trained? Personal security. What is being done for individuals to protect information, or even to have those individuals protect our information? Risk management. How often are we reviewing our risk? Configuration management. Do we have an established baseline of information so we know when something changes that we didn't authorize? Security assessments, both physical and electronic. How are we doing? How is our security? Does it pass our tests? Has something changed that we need to adapt for? All of these things are the various avenues that NIST 800-171 goes into that deals with the aspect of how are we doing? Can we protect information? Now, what is entailed in developing a NIST 800-171 or a Dfars requirement? Well, really, it boils down to these 4 items. The first one is to actually be able to perform a gap analysis or to analyze what we're currently doing compared to what NIST 800-171 says we need to do. The second aspect is we need to talk about how documentation. All right, we did that review. We think we're doing good. How do we document that? How do we show what we currently have implemented? How do we show what we need to still do? What is our evidence of that? That information is documented in what is entitled a system security plan. And that outlines for each one of the 110 requirements, what is our current status of that document? Is it implemented fully? Why do we think so? Point to specific procedures, specific policies that we may have. If it's not yet currently implemented, why not? What do we plan on doing to implement? That's also referred to as a plan of action. What are we going to do to satisfy these requirements? When do we think we have it going to have that done? And finally, it's not listed here specifically, but maybe there's requirements that don't apply to us. Requirements on Wi-Fi, for example. If our organization doesn't have Wi-Fi, what do we do? How do we handle that? Now, in this situation, if an item is not applicable for a reason like that, then you've implemented the requirement because you are protecting Wi-Fi by not having it. Now, the next step in the process is once we know where we're at, once we've documented where we're at, we need to start working on that plan of action. We need to start working toward what's referred to as a full implementation of the requirements, to be able to document and show some progress. If someone came in and asked you where you're at with your implementation, and you showed them a document that was 3 years old and nothing had changed, are they going to feel very confident in what you are currently doing? And then finally, we need to periodically review our risk. We need to update our implementation status accordingly. If we have an incident, which is very likely that will occur, what did we do to adapt to it? How did we resolve that? How did we document what was actually causing the problem? Or maybe we didn't have an issue, but we still want to say that, yes, our situation has not changed. All of the information that we mentioned before is still valid. Here's the date of the last review that we did. All of that goes toward a healthy cyber hygiene. And that is primarily what Nist 800-171 is looking at from an aspect of providing this minimum adequate security. Now, since December 31st, that was the deadline. What's happened? We're now almost 4 years into this. But as an aspect, at first, we really only saw additional information that helped us to understand both implementation requirements, but also to be able to validate whether or not we truly had that implemented. Nist 800-171A is another document that's entitled Assessing Security Requirements for Controlled Unclassified Information. Now, that document primarily takes each of the 110 security requirements in Nist 800-171 and breaks them down between anywhere between 3, sometimes up to 8 points that we need to validate to say, yes, I truly have this requirement implemented. DI Management 82247 is entitled A Contractor's System Security Plan and Associated Plan of Actions to Implement Nist 800-171 on a contractor's internal unclassified information system. Now that's a mouthful, but what does that mean? Well, this is an official document that the DoD releases from the DI Management or the Department of Information that outlines how documents should be structured. What information should be in them? Is it complete? We can utilize this to be able to structure our system security plan and POEM to be able to make sure that what we're documenting and how we're documenting it meets with the DoD's requirements. And then finally, we saw a new document called release that was called the Nist Special Publication 800-171 Dod Assessment Methodology. Now, when this originally was released about 2.5 years ago, it was called the DCMA Assessment Methodology, because this was the assessment methods that DCMA used if they were assessing a contractor system. But back in November of 2019, that information was publicly released. And the Undersecretary of Defense released a memorandum that said, use this method to be able to evaluate and score your implementation. If we come in and evaluate you, this is how we're doing it. So not only did we receive understanding of how they were doing it, but it also provided us a method to be able to review and document our systems ourselves. Now, if we fast forward a little bit more, let's start toward the middle of 2019. We saw 2 new concepts come out, a little bit more detail. I already talked a little bit about the Dod assessment methodology. Now that's been revised a couple times. The initial release was back in November of 2019. And then early 2020, we saw version 1.1 that had some clarifications and updates. And then in June, we saw another version, 1.2. Now, the primary difference that we saw here was things such as adding the concept of a remote assessment to be able to handle assessments in the situation of COVID that we had last year with the shutdowns. So the DoD has been fairly progressive in making sure that even their assessments and methodologies are matching with current conditions. We didn't see assessments stop, but we saw a new method that they could handle these. And also, what else did we see? Well, we saw the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification that we started hearing about early in 2019 as well. Now, that's obviously had a lot of updates. There's been a lot of news. We've seen a lot of conferences. If we look at anything regarding cyber, especially when it comes to the DoD, chances are the first 15 links are going to talk about CMMC. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more to be able to not necessarily get into the details of what is CMMC, but to look at why we need something like this and how it's changed from the current requirements that we're already under. So in regards to that, last year in November, we had something else show up, and that was an interim ruling. Now, the way Dfars works is for them to be able to add a clause. And by the way, there's approximately 3,000 or 3,500 individual clauses within the Dfars. Contracting officers and various branches are able to pick the appropriate clauses for each one of the aspects of the contract. Now, it takes on average 18 months to 3 years for them to be able to add a new clause or to revise an existing clause. When it comes to cyber, which is very rapidly changing though, that's not something that makes sense. So what the DoD does, or what the government does, is they have the capability of creating what they classify as an interim ruling, or they can add an unofficial clause, or it's still technically official, but it's not actually part of the Dfars. And that's exactly what they did. Dfars case 2019 D041, that added a new concept, or two new concepts rather, to what the cybersecurity requirements are for DoD contractors. The first one was they are now making this Dod assessment methodology required. It's no longer optional for a company to choose whether they want to assess their own implementation. And the second aspect was the addition of the cybersecurity certification framework. Now, a couple interesting things that we'll point out with that. Notice that they're referring to CMMC as a framework, not a final product, because it's not a final product yet. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. But really, if we think about it, why did we need this? Why did we need an update to the cybersecurity requirements? They were difficult enough as is. But think of it this way. If you have children, or if you have pets, because sometimes pet owners are a little bit more critical than parents, and you were looking for a daycare or someplace for your child or pet to stay, which one of these two looks more appealing? The top one, which looks official, it looks secure, it looks safe, and chances are there's some sort of state level accreditation. There's some guarantee that this facility is able to keep your child safe. Or how about the bottom one? I see no security. This building doesn't look safe at all, but maybe there's a big sign out front that says, trust us, we can take care of your kids. Well, this scenario is exactly what the DoD is currently running into. under current contractual requirements, there is no validation of your cybersecurity stance. There is no guarantee that you've actually implemented it, but you've already won the contract. You've already have the DoD's children or their sensitive information, and you're now responsible for protecting them. And the DoD realized that with the current cyber requirements that are outlined in 7012, less than 10 to 15% of organizations actually even implemented it. And of those that did, less than 50% are actually providing what's classified as adequate security. Self-attestation is making it just a contractual requirement, and we'll deal with it if an issue comes up, has not solved the problems with information leakage, has not solved foreign adversaries being able to steal information. So as a result of that, they're looking more toward not only assessments of where you're at, but making cyber requirements a prerequisite. Very much similar to that top picture. Before the DoD is willing to give us their information that's sensitive in nature, they want proof that we can protect that information. Now, the interim ruling had two specific items, and that actually was added across 3 clauses. On the left-hand side here, we see the addition of 7019 and 7020. That deals specifically with the Dod assessment methodology. 7019 is making you aware that it requires all offerers to have a current assessment score within the Supplier Performance Risk System, or SPRS. Now, take note of this. It says offerers, not contractors. And the difference between that is 7019 further goes in to instruct the contracting officers within the DoD that if an organization does not have a recent score, they are not to be awarded a contract. This is now becoming a bid requirement or a contract requirement. 7012 then goes on further to say, this is how you perform that assessment. This is how it gets in the system. But it also goes on to further say, hey, this assessment that you put in the system, this is still self-attestation. This is your opinion. We may require, because of the sensitivity of the information, a higher level assessment to be performed. And that would be done by DoD themselves. They also require at this point that if you're using the supply chain, you are responsible for making sure that your supply chain also has a score within SPRS. Now, on the second portion of the interim ruling deals with 7021. That's the other new clause. And that deals with the cybersecurity maturity model. And according to that, contractors, now again, we're talking about contractors, are required to secure and maintain a level of CMMC that is appropriate to the contract that they hold. And they're also required to make sure that the supply chain has and maintains that same level. Now, it's important to realize and remember that there's a separation here. These are 2 separate initiatives. One of them deals with just assessment requirements. The other one deals with certification and certification requirements. Now, when did these take effect? When do I need to worry about this? Well, the Dod assessment methodology started November 30th. As of November 30th, any new contracts or contract revisions are required to have this updated score. Now, it's also important to remember, and I'll say this now instead of in a few minutes, these clauses and these rulings only apply if you have both the 7012 clause as well as this DoD sensitive information. This is one of the reasons if you received new clause or new contracts or new revisions, they're starting to ask you about it. Or you may see new additional clauses added to contracts because they want this in every contract. So they have to also make sure 7012 is in every contract. Now, CMMC gets a little confusing because there's actually two dates in here. The first one was October 30th, but that went into effect only for specific pre-approved contracts. Any additional contracts that apply have to be directly approved by the Office of the Undersecretary for Defense. For general contracts, for general contractors, for everyone else, CMMC will not be a contract requirement until September 30th of 2025. Now, why did they do that? Well, there's two main reasons. The first one is because they want to give contractors time. They want to give them enough leeway and enough head start so that come September 30th, 2025, they're ready. They have their system in place. They have their certification. The other aspect about this is because the DoD is currently running what could be classified as a trial program or a beta program even. And that originally was entitled the Pathfinder program, but it's actually changed names a few times. So, but mostly people know it as Pathfinder. Now, in order for them to be able to make those projects have CMMC a contractual requirement, they had to have some sort of clause to put in their contracts. And now we do. Now we have 7021 that can be applied specifically to both the Pathfinder projects and potentially extremely high value projects that the DoD says we need to make sure the contractors can protect information. Now, again, we're going to talk a little bit now on how we do these. How is an assessment performed? How is CMMC dealt with? Now, the DoD assessments themselves, the first and foremost aspect about it is it requires a system security plan. The idea behind an assessment is you've already gone through the process of doing your gap analysis. You've already created a document that states where you're at, and now you need to be able to assess it. It's directly from the DoD assessment methodology. It states that if a contractor does not have a valid system security plan, they're disqualified for an assessment. They can't produce a score because they don't have the prereqs. So the next step is that the assessment methodology uses that assessment guide, 800-171A, that breaks down each of the requirements into the objectives and then provides a method to determine not only if the implementation is complete, but also if it's effective. That is the document that is used to assess whether or not you have an implementation. What starts with 110 requirements in 800-171 becomes approximately 350 or 400 assessment objectives total. So in that situation, there is a lot more scrutiny with how you're doing it and what you're doing. Now, how do I produce a score? Well, in this situation, you start with a perfect 110 points. And then for each one of the requirements that you do not have fully implemented, you subtract points. Now, that doesn't sound so bad. There's 110 requirements. Even if I didn't have anything implemented, I'd have a 0. Well, that's not true because the point values are anywhere between 1 point, 3 points, or 5 points. It is very possible to end up with a negative score. Now, that score could be as low as negative 150, 100 or negative 240, I think is the lowest you could possibly get. Now, once I have my score, I need to upload it to the supplier performance risk system. If you do not have an account, you need to create one. And there is some documentation on the SPURS system that helps walk you through that. or you can seek out assistance with the PTACs or the MEPs or various other organizations to help establish that account to be able to upload that score. Finally, it's important to know that when you as a contractor do this, this is what the DoD classifies as a low trust assessment. It's self-prepared. Just because you say this is what your score is, that's based off of your interpretation. They also added, in addition with the addition of 70-20, the concepts of a medium and high assessment. Those are conducted directly by the DoD and deal with more from an aspect of more intense review and research. Now, do not be afraid of your score. The score is not a perfect 1 to 10. Instead, think of it more as a balanced scale. And what the score is telling the DoD really is, what is the likelihood that your security implementation can protect sensitive information? If you have more implemented items than not implemented items, the scale tips accordingly. That's all the score is used for. That's all it's really good for. The score values themselves are not weighted accordingly. Employee awareness and training, for example, has the same score value as access control. But it's more of an aspect of how complete is your implementation. How much trust can we put in your system to protect our children or our information? Now, actually, before we start talking a little bit about the security model itself, is there any specific questions at this time on the current requirements and or the assessment methodology? And we'll have more time in a while for Q&A as well. So if you prefer to wait, that's fine. But is there anything specific that we might be able to address now? Looks like
Yep.
we're good. All right.
Yep, there's a question in the chat.
Okay.
It says, to know whether or not I need to be in SPURS, which clause do I look for?
The primary clauses that you want to have is 7012. It's 252.204-7012. If you have that clause, then chances are the next contract you receive or the next contract revision you get, you're also going to have 2019 or 7019 and 7020. It's really 7019 and 7020 that adds the mandate. But the way it's structured, if you currently have 7012, you can guarantee you're going to have 7019 and 7020 pretty soon. So you might as well prepare for it. Now, in regards to contracting as a whole, I will also say this. Even if you do not have 7012, but you receive information, technical drawings, anything along those lines, you might as well prepare for the fact that you're eventually going to have 7012, 7019, and 7020. So now's a good time, regardless of what's exactly in your contract, should you prepare for.
We have a follow-up to that, and it says, what about offerers?
Offers get a little bit tricky. We have had several situations where a offer has been extended the contract, meaning they've been told you're going to get it, but we need you to have your score. You have 14 days to get it in the system. If you are part of the supply chain, you also may have received a letter from your customer that says, please tell us whether or not you have this. Both of these are kind of then that situation. Regardless of it, if you currently have gone through the process and created a system security plan, it does not hurt to go ahead and create a SPURS account, perform the high-level assessment of your implementation and upload a score. That way you're covered regardless. But unfortunately, when it comes to offers, they do not give a lot of time. Remember, even though this is technically a contractual requirement, the DoD still considers these requirements a prereq. They're expecting you already have them done. In their mind, it's not a big deal for you to be able to just document it and put up a score. So they unfortunately don't have a lot of patience or tolerance or understanding when it comes to the fact that you may not have had to have this situation before. Okay.
Another follow-up. Hold on. Sorry. It says, I want to make sure I'm clear. Completing a gap analysis and then writing an SSP and a POAM are not sufficient steps by themselves to be considered compliant with NIST 800-171, correct?
Okay, so a couple things with that. First aspect is the fact that NIST 800-171 lists the requirements that must be implemented. You can implement NIST 800-171, but by itself, there is no compliancy. The compliancy comes into place with Dfars, Dfar 7012 specifically in this situation. And you are correct, to be fully compliant with the Dfars requirements, there is some additional steps. You have to be able to rapidly report an incident to the DoD, and you have to be flowing the 7012 clause down to your subcontractors if you're passing them this information. But the bulk of the work or the bulk of the time takes in reviewing and documenting the implementation of NIST 800-171. If you've already done that, if you've already generated your system security plan, if you already have generated your plan of action, and you're able to report incidences, and you're flowing the clauses down to your subcontractors, then yes, you are in compliancy, regardless of your actual implementation status. It's very possible that you could be in a situation where you have only implemented 10 of the 110 requirements. But as long as you've documented it accordingly, you still are within compliancy with Dfars.
And it looks like another follow-up to the original 2 questions. And it says, will it be specified in the solicitation?
It's supposed to be yes. What we have seen thus far is, unfortunately, with the process of releasing solicitations can take upwards of 6 months. That's what we're being told by the DoD. So for the current ones, unfortunately, it's not always listed in the solicitation because the solicitation was already written and privately posted before this interim ruling came out. But going forward, absolutely. The cybersecurity requirements of 7012, as well as the requirements to upload your score into SPURS, are supposed to be documented within the solicitation.
All right, I think that completes the questions for right now, Jeff.
All right. So now let's talk about CMMC. Now, we briefly already referred to or talked a little bit about the daycare or the pet sitter, if you will. So in regards to this, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC, is exactly that. This is the DoD's method of basically saying, instead of us as the DoD having to be concerned both about the security of our information, but also the security of your system, we're going to split it. And the security of your system, or the basic ability to protect information, is now going to become a prereq. If you do not have that prerequisite, you're not going to even be able to bid on contracts. And the method that they chose to do so was CMMC. Now, CMMC actually adds 2 additional components to the current Dfars requirements. The first one we just talked about was certification, but the other one is they added a separate model or a separate set of lines that measures not only your technical implementation, but also your maturity and how you're utilizing that technical implementation. So we're going to look at that shortly here. But before we really get into it, it's important to notice that the cybersecurity maturity model itself is based off of NIST 800-171. Currently, they utilized NIST 800-171 plus a few various other documents in order to develop it. And the idea behind this was we want to further enhance what the DoD's requirements are. This is not starting from scratch. If you already have your Nist 800-171 implementation, you're well on your way to achieving eventual CMMC. Now, CMMC, the way it works is it's a staggered program. There is actually 5 levels of certification that an organization can achieve, and they build upon each other. Everything that's in level 2 is already in level 1. Everything that's in level 3 is already in level 2 and level 1. Now, they did this for various reasons. The first thing is they realized that based off of the sensitivity of the information you have, you may need more or less security within your system. If you have very basic contract information and that's all, then very basic safeguarding information is all you really need, or a level 1. If you have sensitive information that is outlined in Dfars, then you really need to have that increased protection of a level 3. And then from there, the sensitivity goes up to level 4 and level 5. Now, how does that relate to what we currently are doing in Nist 800-171? Well, if you notice over here, let's look at the level 3. There's a total of 58 practices specific to CMMC. Now, while you're looking at this chart, it's important to remember that as I said, these are progressive. So there's not 58 total practices. There's the 17 from level 1, the 55 from level 2, and then an additional 58 for level 3. But what we want to stress is if you look over at the column for Nist SP 800-171, and then you look over at the FAR column where it says other, what you realize here is that in order to achieve the technical requirements of the technical objectives of CMMC level 3 is all 110 of the requirements from 800-171, and then 20 additional other requirements. Now, these other requirements are not that detailed. What they really compose is in 800-171, there's an Appendix F. And Appendix F details out basic FAR requirements, or very basic cybersecurity requirements that, again, Nist and the DoD are expecting that you have to be doing those in order to achieve the other requirements. CMMC details those out. They're taking nothing for granted. So of those 20 others, the majority of them are composed from that Appendix F. But there are a few other ones that they go into some more detail with. Now, the importance here is to say that we often hear that, well, if you are already compliant and if you already implemented Nist 800-171, you're fine for CMMC. And that's not true. There's additional 20 requirements that need to be documented and detailed, because if you had an assessor, when the assessor comes in, they're going to look for those. They're not understood or expected that they're already being done. They want to see the proof accordingly. Now, the other thing that we like to look at, I forgot, I had highlighted the information there just for clarification, is it's also important to notice or to look at a difference between what is currently in Dfars and what does CMMC do. We hear a lot of things. Well, CMMC is the new Dfars. CMMC is the new Nist 800-171. Well, that's not true. And to be able to say how we can prepare for the upcoming DoD cyber requirements, we need to look at what the current cyber requirements are and how they differ. So DoD, the 7012, that deals specifically just with contractors who receive, transmit, or produce CDI. That's sensitive information. That's the only level they care about as far as protection. Whereas CMMC, with its 5-tier approach, also looks at the concepts of FCI. Now, FCI stands for Federal Contract Information. What does that mean? Well, that's anything that's of a non-sensitive nature, but also not public knowledge. Specific contract numbers, PO conditions, the outlines or details of the contract, delivery requirements, QC requirements, anything that's associated with a contract that's not general public information is considered FCI. So what that means is you may be in a position where you don't have sensitive information. You've never needed to worry about 7012 cyber requirements. You still have to be concerned with CMMC because that is going to be looking at a level 1 CMMC. Dfars itself is single level. I'm either compliant or it's not. There is no variance, there is no condition. But with those 5 levels, that goes all the way from a basic cyber protection to extremely mature cybersecurity practices. That also says that based off of the contract, the level of requirements may be different. You may be way overkill if you're level 3 for some of your contracts, but for that one, you're spot on. Now, 7012 itself is a contract clause. It's a requirement. You're not held accountable to it till you win the contract. Whereas CMMC, though, is really an RFP, RFQ requirement. It will show up primarily within section L and M of your bids or of the proposals, and then it's made into a contract requirement with the addition of 7021. But again, that's not going to take effect until September of 2025. Now, as we briefly looked at before, Dfars has additional requirements. It has incident reporting requirements. It has flow down requirements. CMMC doesn't have those. But what CMMC does is they have a maturity component. They're not only evaluating the technical requirements, but they're evaluating the maturity within your organization. Nist 800, or I'm sorry, Dfars itself allows for a plan of action. Now, these last 2 points are key. And this is the ones that I really want everyone to pay attention to. That maturity component is new. And the last 2 regarding Dfars allows for you to have a plan of action, meaning I don't have all 110 of these items implemented, but I know where I'm at with it. CMMC requires full implementation. All 130 of the CMMC requirements must be fully implemented before you're able to achieve a level 3 certification. That's a huge difference for most organizations. Also, Dfars itself is purely self-compliancy. I say I'm good. I have to upload a score, but the chances of the DoD needing to assess me, not very likely. Trust us, we're doing good. Whereas CMMC requires an external entity to come in and certify your organization to resolve any outstanding issues they find, then you are granted a 3-year certificate. And then every 3 years, you have to go through this process in order to renew your certificate. Now, I'll tell you right now, the predictions for this is, that's not cheap. The initial estimates, I believe, were upwards of 50 to 100,000 just to achieve a level 3 certificate. Now, that also includes employee time for preparation, the cost for the certification that goes to the CMMC board, the cost for the certificate and assessment process that the company that comes out and assesses you. But regardless, Dfars, there's no direct cost for doing it. You're just expected to do it. CMMC, not only do you have to do it all, but then you're going to pay for somebody to come in and assess you to grant you that certificate. There is a full detailed breakdown of the cost analysis that DoD did within the interim ruling, if you're interested in that. Now, I like to do this or handle this sometimes as what I refer to as the CMMC true or false. It's the best way that I have found to be able to answer some of the common issues that we've heard. So the first one there, CMMC is the new version of Dfars. That's absolutely false. They're completely separate components. CMMC is separate from Dfars. However, with the addition of 7021, starting in September of 2025, it will become a requirement that you have a CMMC in order to work with the Department of Defense. Second one, CMMC is now required. Again, that's false. It will not become available or will not become required for general contractors or for general contractual requirements until September of 2025. Now, this is the third one, and this is a big one. Well, it's not required now, but I can still get my certificate now, right? False. No. So CMMC is not only available within the general contractor's contracts, you cannot get a certificate today. We have the CMMC model, the technical requirements. We have the CMMC assessment guides. How can I assess whether I've implemented these technical requirements? But there is two key things that are missing right now. One, we do not have an assessment methodology or a model on how they're going to evaluate maturity. We don't know that. And more importantly, there is no third-party assessors right now. They're not taking applications for an organization to become certified. When will that happen? We honestly don't know. They're currently going through the process with the pilot program. There is a number of internal and external reviews occurring both of the CMMC process as well as the accreditation body. We don't know when they're going to start certifying and training external entities to become these third-party certifiers. And that has to start first before they can open it up for you as an organization to apply for an assessment to receive your certificate. Another big one that is affecting a lot of contractors. I received a letter from my customer saying I need to be certified. Now, there's two answers to this one, and I'm going to cover them separately, but don't get confused. The first one is that this is most likely a false statement. Now, there has been a lot of confusion with the release of the interim ruling. What's ended up happening is in an effort to promote it, to advertise it, to explain it, it was rushed. And the fact that there was two key objectives was lost. And what was heard from those was November of 2020, CMMC, instead of the fact that there was also the addition of the DoD assessment methodology. So as a result of that, a lot of organizations have started receiving letters, not only from the supply chain and primes, but unfortunately also directly from DoD that said, you need to either have a CMMC certificate by a certain date, or you need to state whether or not you're currently in the process of achieving it. That can't happen. Right now, those letters more than likely should say you need to state whether or not you have a DoD assessment score in SPURS. Now, if you received a letter from the supply chain that says something like that, the first and foremost thing you need to do is call them, discuss it with them. Let them know, hey, CMC is not yet available. In fact, the DoD is not even requiring it in general contracts until 2025. I think what you're referring to is the interim ruling and talking about the DoD assessment score. Can you clarify that? Do we understand that? That's what needs to happen primarily first. Now, if it is directly from the DoD that you're receiving that letter, again, this conversation needs to occur, but in addition, please either let the DoD know, let the PTACs know, let myself know, because we have been asked specifically to let certain agencies and departments know if you are receiving a letter from the DoD that states this, because it's wrong. And they're going to go and they're going to beat up on some people. Now, the other answer to this is, well, it could potentially be true. And it could be true from a couple different factors. The first one is maybe you're receiving this letter because the person you got it from is partaking in this beta pilot. And they want to utilize you as the supply chain, but you need to have some additional items. It's not going to directly be a CMMC certification, but it's very similar. The other aspect about this is both 7012 specifically spells out additional security measures, if you remember. So what is very possible to occur in the near future is maybe your customer is not contractually obligated to have a CMMC level, but they want to make sure that their supply chain can protect information, so they're going to require it of you. They are capable of doing that. Now, if that's the case, again, remind them, have a conversation with them that there is no way I can become certified right now. We have no idea when that's going to occur. And that remember that CMMC itself is not a substitute for Dfars. You still need to fulfill the Dfars contractual requirements, even if you did eventually have the certificate. Or if your customer agreed that, yeah, you don't need the certificate until it's publicly available and you achieve it. But in the meantime, you're still obligated to what Dfar 7012 requires. So those are both the answers that could come into play with this. Either way, you need to have this conversation with whoever you receive the letter from to clarify whether it's truly just the assessment methodology or whether they're putting additional requirements upon you, or whether or not they're partaking as part of that pilot program. So I know we're running a little behind where we wanted to be. So I'm going to,
Jeff?
yes.
I know we're running behind, but we did have a couple of questions because I think when we talk costs, we definitely, we were right on time with the
We
question.
were right on time for that, yes.
So I think we dropped a little whammy on the lap. I know definitely in mine as well. So you mentioned the $50,000 to $100,000 expense for around a level 3 certification. So the question, I'm not going to put in my own question. The question from the audience was, does the 50 to 100,000 expense range, hold on, I lost where I was. Where did it go? I guess the question is, does that refer to the initial certification or will that be an expense every 3 years?
No, that is the initial investment. So for example, what they're basically saying is if you ended up running with approximately a $90,000 initial investment, your annual cost would only be around $6,000. So there is a lot cheaper. Well, first of all, you already have the technical item installed. You already have the implementation done. So all of the time and dollar values associated with building that up is primarily complete. Second thing is there is a cost, or will be as it stands right now, to not only apply for the certification, but also to have the assessor come out and assess you. That cost, then there is a separate model for renewals, which is significantly cheaper. So that initial investment is just the first year. But now, in addition to that, for recurring costs, remember, you not only would have to calculate in the cost of renewal for your certificate every 3 years, but you also have to look at potentially any maintenance costs that you have for maintaining the system, or licensing fees for maintaining software or hosted services, or things along those lines. So, but yes, that a cost that they specifically list is the initial upfront cost only. They do have some breakdowns and calculations accordingly on the ruling as well for that.
And just to clarify, for myself and also for my clients that are on the line that probably are going to blow up my phone and my team's phone after this call, is that $50,000 to $100,000, that's not somebody writing a check to that third-party assessor. That's all of the things that they need to perhaps put in place to make sure that they are compliant. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
There is numbers in there for what they predict and the actual assessment to cost. That is considered part of that. But yes, that is not all inclusive as far as one big check.
And then I do have another question regarding cost. So PTACs have received quite a bit of training in regards to CMMC and just cybersecurity in general for quite a while. And at one point we had heard that the cost for certification can be passed along in your contract. Is that true?
Well, you really want to get into the thick of it today, don't you?
Okay.
The answer to that is, according to what has been stated regarding CMMC, the cost of the assessment is potentially reimbursable, but the cost of actual implementation is absolutely not. They classify that as a prereq in order to do work with the DoD. So for example, if, and these are fictitious, please don't quote me on this, if your total investment to be able to achieve a level 3 certificate was 100,000 and the assessment cost associated to that was 30, you potentially could be reimbursed for the 30, but the other 70, they're considering just a prerequisite. Now, the other thing that I will say in regards to this as a word of caution, the DoD has said that this is potentially a reimbursable cost for the contract holder. If you are part of the supply chain, you are not contracted with the DoD. You are contracted with your customer. So as it stands right now, there's a possibility that even those assessment costs will not be reimbursable for the supply chain. Now, before everyone panics, that is a huge issue that is being discussed within the government right now. They're planning on offering potentially various grants and or expenditure reimbursements to help alleviate that cost. But just as CMMC certification itself is not available yet, so also is those funds. But yes, believe me, they realize that this is potentially going to be a very weighty responsibility upon the supply chain and upon companies in order to achieve this.
Yes, I know that the PTACs have definitely, when we have the opportunity to talk with DoD officials, that we have shared the potential impacts to introducing new suppliers into the supply chain with costs like that. So we're continuing to ring that bell. We did have a couple of other questions that came through, and if anyone has other questions, please send them along. This one says, I've heard contradictory information. What level will most small business fall for certification?
So it's going to really depend on what information you receive. If you receive what is classified as CUI or CDI, primarily look at for anything that has export control restrictions, ITAR, for example. Anything that has distribution statements on it, or anything that could potentially compromise national security or a specific DoD related project falls within that bucket. There's other items, but those are most frequently the ones that we see. That is what is equivalent to what falls under the current 7012 requirements, will require a level 3. If you do not have that information, if you just have, I don't receive any information, or I don't receive anything that's identified as such, then chances are you will only be required to have a level 1. Now, I'll also preface at that because we were just talking about costs. The costs that I mentioned equate to a level 3. A level 1 would be significantly cheaper. The assessment cost as well as the implementation cost. But for almost all contractors that are part of the DIB or the Defense Industrial Base, a minimum of a level 1, most likely a level 3. But those are the 2 levels that we're being told to focus on right now.
All right, looks like we had one more question at this point, and it says, when and who will be required to be at least CMMC level 1? I think you kind of answered that. And does does it not include COTS, commercial off-the-shelf items, but may include commercial items?
Correct. So COTS is excluded from this across the board. But let me clarify that. COTS is excluded from the sensitive information or level 3 requirements. It may still eventually be required for just level 1 or basic contract information. Commercial off the shelf is excluded across the board. That has not changed from the current requirements. That's a whole other topic, but there is a difference between commercially off the shelf available and commercially available. But so that is something to keep in mind as well. But yes, if it's something that you could walk into a store and buy, if it's something that you produce and mass sell, and it doesn't matter who's buying it, that is commercial off the shelf. And then which case, then yes, the cyber requirements are not an absolute.
All right. Unless there are other questions, it looks like that completes the questions that we had right now for you, Jeff.
Okay. So this next section, I'll be real quick because I know we're running behind, but what I want to stress is while you're going through this, now this is ultimately what I refer to as what can be done, but it's important to know while you're working on your implementation, there is not one size fits all. Every organization is different. Every entity within the organization is different, and possibly the requirements contract by contract are different. So I refer to this, or I can refer to this from what we see here. We have a whole bunch of cautions. Now, what we see right now is, you could also refer to this caution as sensitive information. I have sensitive information, sensitive information, sensitive information. I have one implementation that fits it all. I'm good. But what if I said this? If you were going to protect yourself from laser radiation, would you rely on the same protection methods that you would if it was a hot surface, or if it was high voltage, or radioactive material? Each one of these cautions has completely different methods of protection. When you're going through your implementation, make sure you're aware of that, because the different types of information that you have is going to vary the level of protection you really should be looking at putting upon it. What that really tells us is that it is critical to know not only that you have this sensitive information, but why is it sensitive? Why does it need to be protected? How am I protecting it? How can I validate that overall protection? Now, with that, then it really brings to what I refer to as the no list. From within your implementation, you are eventually going to be assessed. Whether you are either assessing yourself currently for the DoD requirements, or eventually someone else is going to be coming in to assess you, they're going to ask you questions. Think of a financial audit. You don't just hand them a bunch of documents. No, you spend 90% of the time answering questions. So in regards to that, you need to know what your policies are. You need to know what your practices are. You need to know why it was documented. You need to know why you need to review it. You need to know what risks that document is, that publication or that policy is affecting. You need to especially know if it's effective. And you need to know how, not only how complete it is, but you also need to share this information in your employees. And if assessor came in and looked at one of your policies and said, why do you have this? And they said, I don't know, the guy before me wrote it. Do they really think that you're going to be able to follow through and review and look at the effectiveness? You don't even know why it's in there. Now, in regards to employee training itself, that's critical. I can't tell you how many times I have been into an organization, sit into a room with management or the executives, and they absolutely guarantee me that they have a policy about X, Y, or Z. We do it, we know it, it's always been that way. But you can go out and randomly select 10 people that work there and ask them, and they have no idea. I don't know that that's a policy. I didn't know I couldn't do that. So in regards to that, from a management or from an implementation perspective, Not only how effective is your system if no one knows about it, but for all practical purposes, why bother? If no one is able to actually implement and adhere to a policy, it's not an effective policy. You need to make sure that they're aware of that so that they can be able to handle that. Now, in order to be able to train them and to be able to do that, you also need to know who's involved. Now, from the aspect of an implementation of a security perspective, this is a short list, but every one of these people needs to be involved. Decision makers need to establish the policies. They need to identify what type of information the business is going to protect, why they have that information, what they're going to do with it. Now, that's backed up also with IT. Now, for you IT people, I hate to tell you, but the implementation from an IT perspective isn't for what you think is important. It's to back up and reinforce what the decision makers have said. They should work hand in hand. If they don't, they're not effective. Employees are involved because once I have this stuff in place, they're the ones who ultimately are going to have to follow it. They need to know about it. Maybe not all of it, but they need to know what affects them. And just as importantly, and especially when it comes to CMMC, external resources are critical. Maybe that's guests that come in your building. Maybe that's contractors that you have working for you. Maybe that's hosted services. If an assessor came to you and said, how is this being handled? And you said, well, my hosted service company handles that. And they talk to the hosted service company and they go, we don't do that. That's the company's responsibility. You have a problem. So you need to make sure that not only are you aware of everything that's occurred, but that all parties are aware of what the overall responsibilities are. So then finally, what do we need to do today? Well, in order to start preparing for the eventuality of CMMC, or even the eventuality that DoD is going to come in and do a medium or high level assessment of us, review your current policies. You need to review your current Nist 800-171 implementation. Is it still appropriate? Is it still effective? What do I have left to do? Now, that's another key item. If I have items left on my poem that directly pertain to requirements in 800-171, you may need to review your timetables. Because remember, you need to have full implementation for when CMMC becomes available. If you don't bother signing up for an assessment. All you're going to be doing at that point is paying somebody to come in and tell you you're not ready. Make sure to address your outstanding poem items. Unfortunately, that also means the timetables or the days of being able to say, I'm going to look at a 3-year implementation plan. Chances are that's not going to fly very soon. You won't have 3 years to do it. So make sure to address and account accordingly. And again, reach out for assistance. Do not be afraid to ask an organization, the MEPs, the PTACs, other cyber professionals for assistance in doing this. And finally, and just as critically, is while you're reviewing these items, you need to look and see, how can I evaluate this? One thing we do know about the maturity component about CMMC is it deals with analysis of situation and adjustments. If you cannot evaluate if your current implementation works, if your current policies address all the needs, if your current technical requirements protect you, you will not pass a CMMC assessment. So really make sure that what you have done can also be evaluated and documented accordingly. That, therefore, one last slide. Just keep in mind, Dfar 7012 is still your current contractual requirements. Yes, we have the update that says we now need to upload a score. But while you're preparing for CMMC, you still need to meet your Dfars requirements. The overall CMMC process, as I said, falls very in line. There is no wasted effort. So make sure to keep that in mind. but especially in regards to CMMC specifically, do not focus absolutely on it. Help prepare for it, review the information. But the last bullet is actually critical in regards to this. What is true today may not be tomorrow. This process is still in development, and it's very likely that over the next few years, it will change. So make sure what you're doing is not only very flexible, but also make sure that you're continuously reviewing. See what changed. Events such as this that update with more recent information are also critical. Other than that, final questions.
Looks like the only questions we have right now are, Jeff, is this going to be recorded? I am recording it. There will be a link that will be sent out to all participants, including the slides that will be shared today. So does anyone have any questions for Jeff? He is going to be a part of the panel that is coming up of resources. So you can definitely ask questions then, but if you have questions, go ahead and put them out there now. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds, and if seeing none, we'll move into our panel. But great job, Jeff. Lots of information for people to digest. They might be digesting that information right now, and might have some more questions for you. And I'm guessing, I know I will. And
No
then
problem.
they say, how do we get in touch with Jeff? We'll definitely make sure that everyone has contact information. There he is. It's right on his slides. Jeff, do you have an estimated cost for the level 1 certification?
Not off of the top of my head. Short of saying it will be significantly cheaper. I will pull up that information while the rest of this is going, and if I find it, I'll make sure to note it before the end of the event.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, and thank you for that great presentation. Okay, next up, we are going to move into our panel discussion, and we have Rebecca Yonk, who is representing the PTACs, and she is with the Saginaw Future Region 5 PTAC. Becca, take it away.
All right, I am just going to share my screen here. I don't have a presentation or anything, but I just wanted to have something up. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the different services that PTAC staff can help you with. So the PTAC are trained contracting specialists that will help you obtain the most current and relevant information available, provide insight into the research process, and coach you through the government contracting process from start to finish. To do this, we offer support and services that I'll talk a little bit about today. Many of the services available through the PTACs of Michigan are free of charge. I do encourage you to contact the PTAC office in your area to learn more about different costs that they may have and the specific services offered. So one of the PTAC's most requested services is one-on-one business counseling. This provides an opportunity to address specific client issues such as applications and registrations, marketing strategies, bid preparation assistance, subcontracting opportunities, pre-award survey preparation, quality requirements, contract modifications, and troubleshooting. We are more than happy to set up a virtual meeting or a conference call to go over any government contracting questions you have, or just to chat about your goals and plans for government contracting. To remain what we call active in our system, which is to receive our newsletters, any information about upcoming events, you just need to either attend one event or have 30 minutes of one-on-one counseling time every 12 months. Of course, one of the most important items in contracting is finding the contracts to bid on. Locating government bid opportunities can be really time consuming. There are many different websites and bidding systems that host public bids. We have our own program designed to assist our clients. Electronic bid matching scans a variety of government agencies to provide a report specific to your company's product or service. The bid match provides a wide variety of government bid opportunities, including those from beta.sam.gov database, which is the federal government, DLAs, bulletin boards, state and local agencies, and some foreign bids. To ensure that you only see those bids that you are interested in, we help you develop search profiles that contain keywords, product service codes, NAICS codes, and national stock numbers. To get the most out of your bid match, we encourage you to stay in contact with your PTAC. We need to know if it's not working for you, because we can tweak it to make sure that you are getting bids that pertain to your business. We don't want our clients to feel overwhelmed by the sheer number of bids either. Some PTACs do charge for this service, some do not, so make sure to check with your local PTAC to find out if there are costs associated. Your local PTAC is also here to help you create a quality proposal that contains all the necessary information in the correct format. Government contracts and solicitations frequently refer to documents to explain rules and regulations that must be followed under the government contract at hand. This Cmmc presentation is a good example of a rule and regulation that will be in contracts. We can connect you with resources and documentation needed to effectively respond to contracts. We can't write any proposals for you, but we can definitely go over them with you, see if you missed anything, explain any questions that you have. We also frequently host training sessions to assist local companies in learning more about specific government procurement topics. Of course, you're all here at this event, so this is a very good example of one of our training events. We also occasionally have statewide events. One coming up is our virtual Boeing Industry Day. This will explain how to do business with Boeing. It is upcoming on May 12th at 9 a.m. So check with your local PTAC to sign up for that if that's something you're interested in. Each PTAC does also do their own training as well. So talking about government registrations, we can assist you with completing the System for Award Management, or SAM registration. This is a registration required for all federal government contractors. If you're interested in doing business with the state of Michigan, we can also help you with that vendor registration. Maybe there's another state or local entity that you're interested in doing business with and you need some assistance with that process. That's of course something we can help you with as well. Another common registration you might run into is the Defense Logistics Agency's Internet Bid Board system. If you want to work with the DLA, this is a system that you will need to become familiar with, and we can help with that as well. Now you may be saying, where do I even start with knowing if I need to register with the state or with DLA or any other agency? That's something that we do that we call market research. When I talked about the bid matching program, I mentioned keywords and different codes. After helping you pick out your keywords and codes for the bid match, I can actually use those to find out the top federal agencies that are the top buyers in your industry. I can also look and see who are the top prime contractors for subcontracting opportunities. I can also use any of your competitors that you might have to take a look and see, are they selling to the government, who they are selling to, and what kinds of contracts are they being awarded, if they are being awarded contracts. Now for subcontracting, the federal government has a legislated policy that socioeconomic goals need to be met for small business and specified classifications of small business, such as some examples are 8A, women-owned small business, hub zone, service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. So these small businesses shall have the maximum practicable opportunity to participate in the performance of federal contracts, and federal contractors who receive contracts valued at a specific threshold are also required to carry out this policy of subcontracting goals to small businesses. So we can assist you in applying for these small business certifications, and your local PTAC can also assist in navigating through subcontracting opportunities that are right for your business. So for state of Michigan, the Michigan Department of Technology Management and Budget, or DTMB, they actually have a Contract Connect website that provides education and services for businesses who are looking to contract with the state of Michigan. The department manages the procurement of commodities, services, and information technology valued at a specific threshold for all state agencies. Contract Connect also provides opportunities in design and construction and real estate leasing. At the website, michigan.gov/MI Contract Connect, you can view the current contract portfolio in an Excel format. You just download it. So you can take a look at all the current contracts and find out who currently holds the contract as well. You can also find lots of training materials and upcoming events that will help you guide you through the state contracting process. You can also find contact information for individual state agencies. So these state agencies, these individual state agencies will handle procurements of less than 50,000 currently and below, and that is in the state agency buyer list, which is located on the website. Now, PTACs also provide post-win assistance to businesses to ensure a contract is successfully completed. Your local PTAC can help you make the most of your contract. And, you know, as I said at the beginning, our goal is to help you from beginning to end for all of your government contracting needs. If you have any questions, you know, you can always reach out to us. And if we don't know the answer, we can usually find the answer for you. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Becca. And now we have Dustin Frigge from the Michigan Defense Center, who will do a presentation on some of their services and some new things that they have coming regarding CMMC.
Hello, hi, good morning. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Dustin Frigge. I'm with the Michigan Defense Center as a business resources program manager. And I'm here briefly this morning to talk to you about a Michigan Defense Center program that was developed to support companies seeking compliancy with the Dfars clause and eventually pursue CMMC certification. And the program is called Michigan Defense Cyber Smart. Before I get into it, though, the Michigan Defense Center is a very small team, department of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And the program, the Defense Center program, is focused on working with federal and state agencies, as well as local partners, to protect and grow the defense industry in the state of Michigan. We're very tuned into the cybersecurity requirements from the Department of Defense and working with an advisory committee that includes the Army, PTACs, Mmtc, and many other partners throughout the state. And they helped guide us in the development of the Cyber Smart program. And the idea behind the program was to support Jeff's bullet point and his closing statements of his presentation, talking about, you know, what to do next. And one of the things you can do is work toward full Nist 800-171 implementation for your company to help with that eventual CMMC certification, whether it's levels 1, 2, 3, or beyond. A good way to get started now, knowing that this is going to be some years in development. Many companies in the state we've heard from want to be proactive about this and want to get moving on it now and stay ahead of the curve. Has a lot of benefits. One of them being a lot of the prime contractors that are looking for subcontractors right now, if they're looking for new subs to enter their supply chain, this is one of the check boxes on their review page for accepting a new subcontractor is this subcontractor proactively pursuing Nist and CMMC for their company and protecting their cybersecurity infrastructure. So the idea behind this program was to pre-qualify a number of Michigan-based cybersecurity professionals to conduct gap analysis for Michigan companies looking for Nist implementation and CMMC certification eventually. So earlier this year, late last year and earlier this year, the Michigan Defense Center assembled a team from our advisory committee from public and private sector organizations to review Michigan-based companies that were in cybersecurity that wanted to be involved in this program and that wanted to assist other Michigan companies in their pursuit of Nist implementation and improving their cybersecurity infrastructure to prepare for CMMC certification. So really today is the first day this has gone live. You can find the Cyber Smart program at the Bid Targeting System website. I'll talk about that in a second. And it'll give you information on all 6 of the pre-qualified vendors here in Michigan that were selected to provide this gap analysis service to companies. And really the gap analysis is the first step for a lot of companies in understanding what their cybersecurity infrastructure looks like. And I don't want to repeat, Jeff did an awesome job this morning laying out pretty much soup to nuts having to do with CMMC and all the DoD cybersecurity requirements. One of those first steps is doing a gap analysis on your own cybersecurity infrastructure using the 110 Nist questions as the framework. So this program is set up for you to apply to have this gap analysis done by one of the 6 vendors that you select to come in and do the gap analysis for your company at a set cost of $1,500, which is dramatically lower than if you would likely go out to the private sector to have a full gap analysis done in your cybersecurity infrastructure around the Nist framework would cost upwards of much more than $1,500. So by going to this site and applying for the program, you'll be approved to work with one of our pre-qualified vendors to come in and conduct this gap analysis, provide you with a full gap analysis report, which you can then use to apply to a system security plan and a POAM for your milestones, and essentially prepare yourself for upload of your Nist score to SPRS and become essentially compliant for what that is at the moment. So we're really trying to help companies get that first step towards assessing their own cybersecurity infrastructure by giving them a low-cost entry point and leveraging one of our rigorously pre-qualified Michigan-based cybersecurity firms that are qualified to do this kind of work for your company. So that's a very high-level look at the Cyber Smart program. I would point you to the Bid Targeting System. This is online software sponsored by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation and the Michigan Defense Center. This is where you can go to apply for access to the Cyber Smart program and read a ton of information about the program, and also research the 6 different pre-qualified vendors to see which one, if any, you would like to work with within the program. The bid targeting system has a number of other features, including access to a grant program that you can use to hire pre-qualified professional proposal writers that can help you respond to federal and defense contract opportunities. And the bid targeting system is free for all Michigan companies. So you go in there, click on register, and it has a very simple step-by-step process on how you can get access to your free BTS account. And that is how you get in to read about the Cyber Smart program and all the vendors included there. So that was real quick. I wanted to keep us moving along here. You can get a hold of me at friggy@michigandefensecenter.org. That's my email address on the screen right now. So thank you. And thanks for the invitation to present this morning.
Thank you, Dustin. And now we will have Stephanie Fenton from the DCAP program.
Okay, there we go. Just getting my screen up here for everybody. Looks like we need to close out what is currently sharing for me to be able to share.
There we go.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, Stephanie.
Okay, excellent. So I am Stephanie Ludwig, and I am from the Economic Growth Center at Economic Growth Institute at the University of Michigan. And I'm super thankful to have the opportunity to present today to share information with everyone about the Defense Cybersecurity Assurance program. But you may be wondering how the university got involved in cybersecurity. So really quickly, I'd just like to give you a brief history. So back in about 2012, 2013 timeframe, forecasters at the Economic Growth Institute foresaw the downturn of defense spending from sequestration, that it was going to significantly impact small to medium-sized businesses and the defense supply chain. So they explained that impact to the Department of Defense, which resulted in DoD funding that was then known as DMAP, Defense Manufacturing Assistance Program, that helped companies throughout Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana to stay strong when defense spending was down. Our consultants helped many companies to diversify and keep their businesses strong and vibrant so that when spending was back up, the defense supply chain would still be strong. But at the end of that program, that was when we saw a new core business need arise because the Department of Defense had launched the Dfar requirement of Nist 800-171 that Jeff told us all about, that was required to be implemented by the end of 2017. And we knew that these companies would need assistance. So we then worked with the Department of Defense to receive additional grant funding, which is now known as DCAP, the Defense Cybersecurity Assurance Program. So the goal of this program was to get as many defense suppliers to be compliant with the Dfars 252-204-7012 as possible. Many of the suppliers we worked with were low-tier suppliers in rural areas. They were unaware that these requirements would apply to them. They had no idea CMC was going to be coming and it would apply to everybody. So at that time, we helped, directly helped 93 companies to work towards their Nist 800 requirements while doing a cost share program, getting them with a consultant that could assist them through that process. So at the end of that grant, we knew there were still many companies that needed assistance with reaching compliance. So in September of 2019, we received another round of funding to assist with that mission. But this round had a little bit different nuance. So it was different in that while we still had the compliance projects, just like in DCAP 1, where we assisted companies through with consultants to become compliant with Dfars and prepare for CMMC, we also hosted and participated in multiple seminars across the state. Another component of the grant was workforce needs focus groups to help identify what workforce needs are, what's driving them, and what the industry perceives as possible solutions to address those needs as it relates to cybersecurity. And in addition, we were tasked with supply chain mapping. So in order to keep the supply chain strong, we have been mapping cyber providers across Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana that can provide products and services to assist small to mediums with their cybersecurity needs, and also mapping new technologies that are being developed in universities across the state related to defense cybersecurity. So let's look at where we stand now. As you can see by this slide, across the 3 states, so far, we were able to assist 37 companies. We invested over $175,000 in project funds to assist those companies. Currently, we do not have any compliance project funding available, but do not lose hope. We have several projects in the works with our partners, several who are on this call, and we anticipate being able to assist more companies by summer. So please feel free to reach out to me with your contact information so that I can pass along any new funding opportunities to you as soon as they become available. Typically with grants, it's first come, first serve. So the sooner you respond to any call to action, the better. For our seminars, along with our OSU, Purdue, and with our partners at OSU and Purdue, we have presented at over 30 seminars, which include 20 cyber topics in 20 weeks that our partners at Purdue hosted. This was a great series that focused on very specific components of cybersecurity as it relates to CMMC. And if you're interested in any of those particular topics, the sessions were all recorded and can be accessed through our website. And these slides will be going out to you at the end, so you'll have information on how to contact me and how with our website information. So for supply chain mapping, we were able to get 87 responses from companies that identified that they can assist with CMMC requirements. And through our research on cyber technologies being developed at universities, we were able to map 10 technologies that are currently being developed. Those are new technologies related to cybersecurity, and also found 51 resources that are capable to assist in cybersecurity development. So the data that we collected can be found on our website under supply chain mapping. There's a list by state that includes a company overview, the contact information, as well as a chart that breaks down the provider's capabilities to assist by certification level and domains. We also have the technology under development and resources available on our website. These can be searched through an interactive GISD map, or can be downloaded in a resource document. And the last component of was our workforce needs focus groups. And these focus groups were designed as a method to collect data not only on workforce needs, but also to work towards understanding those solutions. So we have just finalized this report, and it includes all the areas that you can see listed on the slide. This document will be available on our website soon. So if you'd like to review the information on what we found, you'll be able to look at that. I would imagine by the end of this week, it should be up on there. But that brings me to an upcoming opportunity that we do have. So EGI recently received a STEM Challenge Grant Award from the Department of Commerce's Economic Development Administration, or EDA, to develop an advanced manufacturing work and learn program. We're calling it AMCP because we need more acronyms. So this program fills a critical need in Michigan for cybersecurity professionals with a specific knowledge for manufacturing. This program is going to combine online instruction and hands-on learning labs to build cybersecurity knowledge within a manufacturing setting. And there are two components of this program for you on this call that you may be interested in. The first are learners. Learners will complete an online cybersecurity curriculum over several months and will be matched with a company to work and learn cybersecurity in a manufacturing environment. It will be a comprehensive online curriculum with our partners through University of Michigan Nexus and HackerU that already has a cybersecurity boot camp. But for manufacturing, manufacturers can develop new talent while addressing key needs in cybersecurity by hosting an intern. This may be a current employee that you put through the program to upskill, or you could host a new learner going through the program. The benefits that in participating in this is that not only would you receive cybersecurity services, you're helping to develop a workforce with foundational skills for advanced manufacturing, which we know requires cybersecurity. So this program is scheduled to launch in spring. So if you are interested, please shoot me an email and I can keep you updated as it becomes developed with that. My next slide are just some resources that we have available. Some of the resources that you can access in order to assist in your cybersecurity maturity journey. So these will be available to you when you get the slides. And that is it for me. I wanted to keep it short and sweet. If you have any questions, again, here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out and I will assist you the best I can.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm excited to hear about that new program. So hopefully some of our clients will take advantage of it. I know we've had several that have connected with you all in the past, and you guys have always taken very good care of them rather.
Thank you.
All right, so we are at that point where we are doing Q&A. So if anyone has any questions for any of our panelists or Jeff, who is also a part of the panel, Jeff, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add about MMTC, but you're more than welcome to do that at this time while we wait for a few questions to come in.
Sure. Actually, first, back to the level 1 certification question. So just to clarify these, with the costs that are associated to this, the way the interim ruling did this was they said, these are the costs from the difference of where you should be to where you need to be for CMMC. So for example, level 1 certification, they say that roughly the cost for assessment will be approximately $3,000, and that's annually. However, that's under the assumption that the organization already has all 15 items in place for the basic FAR clause that it supports cybersecurity. So that 3,000 annually that's listed there, realistically for an organization to implement from start to finish would probably be closer to 10 to 12. So you're looking at roughly about $10,000 to $12,000 for initial CMMC assessment for level 1. Outside of that, Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center, we are the Michigan member of the MEP, which is the Manufacturers Extension Partnership. We are partially sponsored by Nist. The MEP program was actually funded initially or created initially by Nist with the goal of assisting small to medium size, specifically manufacturers, but we do work with outside of manufacturers as well. So we have services that range anywhere from traditional manufacturing services, lean, quality, various other items. We also work with the food industry. Cybersecurity is obviously one of our areas. What makes us fairly unique when it comes to the cyber world is because our primary partner is Nist. We do have some direct relationship with not only Nist, but also various entities within the government, including the DoD. So that definitely helps us to be able to formulate and talk. Frequently, I am on the phone, for example, with the individuals who are responsible for educating the DoD directly on these requirements. So between the two of us, we kind of play the bridge between general contractor community and internal DoD. But definitely, as I said, we work with cyber, we work with all other aspects. When we do pertain or work with cyber, we try to not necessarily just help with the cyber aspect, but to help organizations realize how it fits within their current business and their business objectives. So we use a lot of the concepts from traditional lean and quality and Six Sigma and various other items that businesses are already familiar with to be able to show them how cyber can play a part directly in that without having to start over and learn a whole new area for their business.
Awesome. We are so lucky in the state of Michigan to have so many different resources that are able to help our business communities. So we did have a couple of questions that came in. We have one for Dustin. It says, Dustin, what is covered under the gap analysis? Is there a way to tell the difference in what you might get from one vendor versus another?
So that's a great question. The gap analysis is really based on the 110 question Nist framework. So what you'll essentially get from any one of the 6 vendors is going to be a consistent product that closely mirrors what's in the Nist guidelines for 800-171. So the result, I could probably bring up an example, but if you look at the Nist evaluation scorecard, it has your score on that particular question out of the 110, and then a comment about where you're at with the implementation, whether you've implemented it, and if you haven't, what needs to be done or what is missing where you have to answer no to that question. Essentially, you're going to get the same product from any one of the 6 vendors, but at the bid targeting system website, there is information on all 6 vendors, including their marketing pieces, links to their websites, and additional information. We encourage anybody that's considering this to do a little due diligence on each of the 6 vendors and select the one that seems like a good match for your company. Each of them has a little bit different background and different set of experiences. that you probably want to take a look at when making your decision.
Thank you, Dustin. And we have a question for Jeff. It says, does MMTC provide a gap analysis for companies? And if so, what is the cost?
We do. We actually, the programs we have are usually fairly tailored to what the specific company's requirements are. The general cyber ones that we do, sorry, I wasn't quite expecting that direction. No, we look at it more from an aspect as well, as far as not just a gap analysis per se, but more also from a business analyzing the business processes, as well as an understanding of the specific information, all the way through helping to plan what would need to be done, or what would a fully environment or a fully implemented environment look like. So we kind of spread the spectrum across there. The programs themselves are also structured a little bit more from a price standpoint, depending on the current sophistication level. One of the items we realized, for example, was a lot of small businesses do not have very many documented policies and procedures, or their infrastructure itself is not in a position that would be able to accommodate the IT side. So instead of spending a lot of time and effort to try to retrofit or adapt that, instead we focus more on taking their current business processes and turning those into appropriate practices and procedures, or helping them to look at the type of system architecture that they would need for the type of information that they have. And that varies depending on the size of their business and everything else. I hesitate to talk pricing specifically because it is so dependent on the exact company's requirements. I think probably if it's something that you would be interested in, definitely give me a call. We can talk online, talk a little bit more about your specific business and what you need, and kind of go from there. At a high end, our complete package is usually 10,000. But obviously, like I said, depending on what is actually needed, what the sophistication level of the current cyber program is, it obviously goes down from there.
All right. Well, it looks like we don't have any more questions at this time, but we are going to, as stated earlier, we are going to share a link to this training, as well as all of the slides. So you will have the contact information for all of the panelists, as well as for Jeff, to be able to ask any questions that you might have after you digest all of this good information that you've received regarding CMMC today. So we want to thank on behalf of, well, first of all, I'm Jasmine McKinney. I'm the program manager for the Region 6 Procurement Technical Assistance Center at the Fenton Genesee Economic Alliance. And so we want to thank Stephanie and Dustin and Becca and Kathy and Jeff for participating today to bring this information to the clients in our respective regions. Really highly encourage everyone, if you have questions, if you want to talk things through that maybe you don't fully understand, to reach out to any of these resources, as well as reach out to your PTAC counselor, just to talk things through and see how we can get you moving forward on the right track. Without any further ado, I am going to tell you all to have a great day. And again, thank you for your participation in today's webinar.